All right, hi there, and welcome to this Google Hangout brought to you by the Canadian Marketing Association. My name is Jonathan Chiraboga, and I'm a marketing blogger at digitalopenconcept.com. With my colleague who's not here, we are delighted to be moderating this panel of three industry thought leaders on one of the most relevant topics in the marketing industry today: privacy versus personalization. So, without further ado, let me introduce our panelists. First up, Scott Stratton. Scott is a man of many talents. He's an author of 3 best-selling books: Unmarketing, the Book of Business Awesome and Unawesome, and his latest, QR Codes Kill Kittens. He's a speaker, blogger at unmarketing.com, podcaster of the Unpodcast, and frankly, he's one of the coolest people I've ever met. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Scott Stratton.
If this camera goes to me when I talk or move, the rest of the panelists are screwed because I never stop flailing around and talking. So good luck to the rest of you.
All right. Next up, we have John Michael Morgan. So John is the Chuck Norris of marketing because he's just so friggin' awesome. He's a blogger at johnmichaelmorgan.com, a consultant, speaker, and author of Brand Against the Machine. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. John Michael Morgan. John, you want to say hi?
Thank you for having me, and I shall. Yeah, I'm saying hi right now.
Right.
How are you? And I'm going to talk over Scott the entire time.
I have to talk over the birds. That's the best part.
All right, and last but not least,
These birds follow me wherever I go.
Last but not least, we have Matthew Vernhout, Chief Privacy Officer and Manager of Deliverability at Inbox Marketer. Not only is Matthew a respected thought leader and authority on email, but he also has driven initiatives in Canada to protect people's privacy and reduce spam. He currently sits on the Privacy Board of Directors for the Direct Marketing Association of Canada. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Matthew Vernhout.
Hey, Jonathan. Thanks for having me today.
Thanks for being here. So let's get right into it. One of the hottest topics right now in marketing is the debate between privacy versus personalization. You can't go to a conference these days without someone saying that marketers need to better understand and talk to each customer as an individual. One-to-one marketing is possible more than ever before with the amount of data that a brand collects on their customers. On one side, this presents a great opportunity for brands to give a personalized marketing message or experience, but on the other side, it can allow for a breach of privacy for customers to have a sour taste in their mouth. My first question for the panel, and I'll direct this to Scott first. If personalization gives us, the customer, the content that we're interested in seeing and gives us a better shopping experience, isn't that a good thing? When does it start becoming an infringement on privacy, Scott?
Well, that's the thing is first off, the common person, if they knew both how much data people had, marketers had, and what they could do with it, I don't think they'd ever leave their homes, which wouldn't help them at all. But they would never leave. It's scary when we go to like you said, most conferences, the one that I go to, talking about big data and what to do with it and how much they know. I walk around saying, imagine just a regular consumer walked into this and said, you know what about who? Like, it's really scary. Except we have contradicting statistics. You have a bunch of people out there as a common citizen who says, no, privacy is very important. We need this. And on the flip side of it, we have more than that percentage saying, I want customized shopping experience and website experiences, and I want the very topical ads coming into my things and how it all works. Like, I remember when Gmail was originally years ago talking about putting kind of the ads within your email and the context of your email, and people were like, you can't, what, you're reading our stuff, everybody's reading our private, boring emails, and then they did it, and nobody cared for the most part. It's like that Terms and Conditions documentary that just came out, and if you haven't watched that and you're in marketing, you need to go watch that documentary. Is that the permission we give them by not reading Terms and Conditions is ridiculous, and the problem is when you start using it in a creepy way. Now, there's a difference between we have a problem here. We're invited to Vegas a lot, and we go to casinos a lot, and we use the players' cards. And the grandfather or the godfather, is probably a better term, for Vegas of loyalty agreements was those players' cards. Now, there's different ways to use that data. If somebody came up to me while I'm playing a table and says, hey, Mr. Stratton, we saw that you liked Cirque du Soleil 6 times on Twitter, and then your mom actually liked them 3 years ago, and so here's some tickets, you're like, that's creeping me out. But if somebody walked up to me still with the same data and said, hey, Scott, we appreciate you playing here. Here's a couple of tickets to Cirque du Soleil tonight. Same data, different execution. I don't think we mind as much as people say we mind about the data going out there, since we willingly give it to them. But the problem is when we look at it and say, how do we then throw it back in our faces? And is it at the point where we walk into a store and the store says, hi, Scott? And here's the greatest items. And part of me says that's awesome. And the other part of me says don't show people in public what I browse on the internet. It's going to be weird.
That's right. Is there anyone else that wants to kind of weigh in on that?
Well, I certainly.
Go ahead, Matt.
Go ahead. No, please.
Okay. Well, I agree with Scott completely, because I think for years we were complaining that marketing and advertising wasn't relevant to us, and now that it can be, it creeps us out, and I don't think we can have it, both ways. And as much as it does pain me to admit that Scott was right, I think when he said it's all in the execution, that's it. I mean, that's what's spot on. It can be done in a helpful way, or it can be done in a I've crossed the line and this is now, sort of creepy kind of way. And I think that's what a company needs to decide is, are we freaking people out, or are we being relevant and actually useful?
Matt, do you want to weigh in on this too?
No, I completely agree at this point with both John and Scott. It's really the idea of when do you get too creepy, when do you overshare what you know, and I think really when you look at combining the example that Scott gave, the Twitter data with the Facebook data, and then your friends' data and what your friends like, and then present that, that's too far. Whereas if you just use that intelligently and then tweak your message, or personalize parts of your message, not even necessarily the whole message, but parts of the message to that individual, you're going to increase relevance without increasing creep factor.
And that's the thing, is I actually wouldn't mind if some brands actually did it more. Like when we check into Caesar's Palace, and I promise this whole thing won't be about our gambling addiction, but when I check into Caesar's Palace and they have my information, they're like, Mr. Stratton, okay, would you like a king or two queens or smoking? I'm like, I've been here 27 times. You know all this stuff. So we'll come and say, we got you set up with the king bed, we got you this, and reservations at Rayo's for your favorite spaghetti meatballs that you have every time and you put on your room, so we see it all anyways. Like, we can actually make people, and it's actually counterintuitive for some people, we can actually make people feel even more special and valued if we use the data they've given us. And where, again, it jumps over that creep factor is when you start using data I haven't realized I've given you. Like the data that's, talking about the beacon type of thing, where you go elsewhere and we'll track that down the road. I don't want Caesar's Palace saying, hey, by the way, when you guys were in Orlando, you went to this restaurant or this place and you ate there. That's where I think we start overstepping that data bounds when it comes to at least telling us that you know that. We know you know that potentially, and we know that, but I don't want you jumping at it outside of that creepy circle. And it depends on how intimate you are with the brand. I'm not sure I want Charmin toilet paper recommending the toilet paper I need because of what I ate last week. It might be cool, it might be neat, but I don't want that type of brand intimacy with a type of a very kind of low commodity purchase. But when I'm using a car, an auto dealership, a casino type of stuff, it could be insurance, it could be my insurance people, or people who are very connected and trusting with me, they can use the information I've already given them in a better way, for sure, because we haven't used it barely at all. Like I get mailers, from the right here. This is how many I get. It's right in front of me. It was just in my recycle bin. I get mailers every other day from the casinos. Like literally, Vegas casinos keep the direct mail industry alive, I believe. And they just give me blanket brochures, blanket things that say this, when in reality, if they just customized it to my habits, we'd fly down there. We'd go there because they matched it properly. And unfortunately, they just kind of take a bulk data. And they do demographic in the general sense, when we're looking at almost a one-to-one level of data that we can really tailor things towards. There isn't 9 groups you're buying from. There isn't 6 groups and you can name them Jenny and Jeff and Frank and here's our targets. There's millions of combinations of wants and demographics that we can really target the way we should be doing with that data.
There's a lot of data out there right now. There's a lot of data that a brand can collect on their customers. So I want to move on to my next question. I want to direct this to John first. So John, is privacy dead? And I know that's a loaded question, but has privacy gone away? I mean, we as customers can be tracked when we go online, when we shop in a store. Is privacy dead?
Yeah, I think it is. And in general, there's obviously things that you can do that are private. Whatever you do, behind closed doors usually stays there. But we're all online now, and so people can know what we're up to 24/7. basically. And so it's very naive to assume that, we can have, a private sort of life. I was actually talking to a friend of Scott and I's yesterday, Mitch Joel, and he was talking about how long he purposefully would not let Facebook know where he graduated from high school. And sure enough, he gets an email from Facebook like last week, and it said, "Hey, you were class of whatever year at such and such high school. Is this correct?" And he thought, crap, they found me. So no matter how much you try to hide some of this info, they are going to know. And I think that that privacy is dead. Now the question is, or actually not even a question, but I think Scott said it right off the top of this, that he was so true. We think we care, but do we really? When we throw out the word privacy, we all act like we care. But at the end of the day, no, I don't care. I don't care that Gmail reads my emails. I mean, I feel sorry for if there's an actual person at Google reading them, because their life is very, very boring. Hopefully they've automated that. But, we like that, we like personalization. And again, like, what we were saying earlier of, if you've given them the info, you're always cool with it. It's like if we go to a mom and pop store and they're like, "Hey, do you want your usual?" We're like, "Oh, they know us. That's great." And we loved that. And then we used to complain that big businesses didn't have that feel. Now big businesses have the data and are trying to have that feel, and we're like, "No, that's creepy." Well, again, we can't have it both ways. So yeah, we don't live in a private world anymore, but I don't think that necessarily means that we should all freak out.
The greatest moment to know that privacy was dead, the best definition of it, and it made me golf clap when I saw it, was when Randy Zuckerberg, so Mark's sister, put on Facebook a picture of the family at the holidays standing around the kitchen, and a friend of a friend saw it, took it, and put it up on Instagram and said, "Look at the Zuckerbergs enjoying the Christmas." And Randy got pissed and said that was private, which is the greatest thing I've ever heard. Is the sister of the man who has the data of almost the entire world says something is private. It's a simple rule. If you didn't invent it, it's not private, right? As soon as you sign up, we give away our privacy long before we realized it. That if you have Gmail, if you have Hotmail, if you have Facebook, if you've given up so much part of that. One of the most fascinating things in data collection to me was when Facebook rolled out the like button to be on third-party sites, and the data they could gather from that point on was fascinating. We've been giving up data since we've had our loyalty cards with stores. Like, we've been giving up data since in Air Miles programs, or here the Shoppers Drug Mart, a point system, and around the world. You use that card, you're telling them, "I'm here, this is what I'm doing," and they already have the demographics. So again, it's like we're revolting to something that happened a decade ago, and it's just because of the creepy factor or the profit factor. You always hear when Facebook says, "Well, they changed the term of service, now they can profit off of it." The only way a lot of these sites profit is user data, right? The only way Air Miles profits here, especially in Canada, is because they're giving your data back to these people. It's not because you get one Air Mile for every $20 million you spend. It's because you spent it and said, "Scott, 39 years old, just bought this, who also bought this, 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 and this." We've been giving our data away for so much longer than we've been complaining about it. And we're just kind of realizing it now, and it's a little too late unless you want to delete yourself off the internet.
Well, Scott, I think
that's a great point. Go ahead, Matt.
I wouldn't say it's completely dead. I think the examples you're using are self-selected giving of information. I choose to use my Air Miles card. I don't have to. I choose to use it when I shop. I choose to use it when I do things, knowing that they're going to use that for certain things. It's when they start to expand and append third-party data or append additional data from other sources and append news, and when you start seeing things around, NSA and government now looking at your Facebook and what you're liking to profile you on how likely you are to vote for one party or the other, that's where things start to get creepy, and I think that's where people are having the most concern. Not so much I use my loyalty program, not so much I subscribe to a newsletter, not so much I checked in on Foursquare. Those are people that know they're doing things, they're getting either a reward for doing it, or they're getting they're self-selecting to give up certain parts of privacy to participate in the program. It's really when you start adding that third-party data that people are certainly not interested in, or not knowingly volunteering, or not knowingly approving in their privacy policies. There was a study that I saw last 2 weeks ago at the Canadian Privacy Symposium that said, the more sensitive the data, financial, healthcare, those types of things people have always been hyper concerned about. They don't want anywhere digital or less likely to be digital, but offers, coupons, discounts, those types of things, send them to me in a promotion, send them to me in an electronic way. I'm willing to give up a little bit more privacy for those things. It's really the sensitive stuff that they want to protect more so. And they're trying to figure out that balance.
All right, that's a fair comment. Was there something that you wanted to mention, John?
Well, I was just going to say, echoing on what Scott was talking about, we've done this for years. We've given up the data. I think about, the mom in the minivan who's got, their kid's school, stickers on the back of, the window and, soccer balls and things like that, and their kid's name is on their backpack and things like, privacy is something that, hasn't been guarded as much as we thought it was from the beginning. And so and the airline miles, another great example, our info has been out there, and direct mail companies, heck, they've had it, for ages, and somehow now, because it's digital, we feel like that's extra creepy. And again, I just think that, we can't have it both ways. We want companies to know exactly what we want and meet our needs. They need certain information maybe to do that better, and then we freak out about it. And so I think the thing is, privacy, that's not going to change. People aren't going to stop collecting our info and trying to use it. What's going to change, hopefully, is that businesses just use it better and make it more relevant. And it's not going to freak us out. If I walked into a clothing store and they said, hey, we know that you like the color black, and here's our 10 best black shirts on sale, and you don't have to walk to the store looking for them. I think that's amazing. Or like Scott said earlier, if you go in and they're like, "Hey, John, okay, that is awesome. Sign me up for that. I would like everyone to say, "Hey, John," no matter where I go. That is fantastic. But that's not how businesses end up using it.
Well, that's where retail, to me, that's why for me, retail, when it comes to loyalty cards, I should be swiping my card when I walk in the store. Because and then they say, look, past purchasing then dictates what I'm potentially looking for. Why is there not a person at the front saying, if you want to swipe, we can help you find what you kind of already are interests? Where swiping it at the end, it's too late to potentially influence the sale. It's so post-purchase, when in reality it should be pre-purchase, because I have all that data now. And why am I not using that? Well, because the retailers only want to use it post-purchase necessarily. So we can target you once you've left the store. We can mail you. I'm like, why not? Why haven't we done the better thing? Why has it taken us now over a decade in collecting loyalty information to say it should be pre-purchase? It should be different. And we're also very protective of the mode of communication. Nobody complains very about spam much on email because it's so huge. People get direct mail and junk mail all the time, and we don't usually have an issue with it. But try spamming somebody's text. Try SMS. Try doing a text on a phone, and people will lose their freaking mind. They will hunt you down with furious anger if you text, including myself. I will do that. So we're very protective of certain ways of communication. So when you give up your cell number to a brand, that is so amazing that it's not. I'm amazed. I was talking to my brother about this yesterday. He got a spam text, and it's the first time he's ever gotten one in his life. And he says, why did it take them so long? And I'm like, we're just so protective of that part of us that we need to be careful on, on how we're using this information, because people are saying now, well, mobile is this, and we're 5 years late to that mobile party. But how do we use this better? And I heard a realtor say, well, I got my cell phones of my clients. I should just blast them, with my open house coming up. I'm saying the word blast should never be in anything you say in marketing, let alone to people's cell phones, right? And so we need to be very aware that there is a certain boundary, not just creepiness on how we approach people, but what avenue we approach them on as well.
There's a fine line between privacy and personal.
Would you say some of that comes from the cost shifting too? So things like SMS messages typically cost people money. Well, some people money.
Right.
In Australia, they have a pretty stringent anti-spam law because data is paid by the download, right? So you're paying based on download. So they've upgraded their anti-spam legislation. Whereas in North America, it's you buy so much download and so much gigabits, and however much you have. If you don't use it, you don't use it. But you pay for it. If you use it all, well, you pay extra. So is that part of the perception there too? Is
But
you paying for
there's the
delivery?
barrier to entry to spam too, right? You know, direct mail. You don't, most of the time we get direct mail from legit companies because they still got a paper piece, right? You're not going to spam. But the thing is, like I said, it's email. All I just got to do is run a couple servers offshore somewhere else and just kind of throw it out there. And every trillion I sent out, I'll still make $100,000 until we stop clicking. It won't change. You won't change that type of thing. So it's the barrier to entry when it comes to cost. And luckily, other times you can't do that mass SMS without kind of, because if the conversion is 1%, we can't afford necessarily send out 10,000 text messages to do that. And I just think the backlash would be equal to Braveheart. You know, when we start kind of trying to do that, because we'll just be rushing the hills in kilts and trying to, you'd kill a brand for doing it.
Absolutely.
I look great in a kilt.
Absolutely.
We're already seeing
There's a thin line between. Sorry, no, go ahead, Matt.
You know, we're already seeing that in the U.S. where they've launched a new service for SMS spam reporting. Right, forward your SMS spam to the shortcode spam, and then the FTC will take it and start to investigate. You know, I don't think we're that far behind having that in Canada.
Well, you got it, but also, you know, what does everybody check? They check their texts. So how valuable is that piece of data to be able to sell? You know, if I get that, you know, it's worth more to me than sometimes a credit card number. You know, if I can I can sell those by $1 a number because they're so you know, held in a way that's you know, right up on the highest pedestal. So selling spam email addresses is not a business much anymore, but you get yourself 10,000 SMS numbers in Canada, or you know, you can make a couple bucks.
Absolutely.
Yeah, and I think you guys are right in that it's the last thing that we can hang on to protect. So this morning I signed my son up for school, and they asked for my cell phone number, and I was like, "Why would you need my cell phone number?" And they were like, "Because if your son gets hurt at school, we need to be able to contact you." And I was like, "Oh, okay. Like, I guess that's good enough." So I gave them my number, and then like 10 minutes after I leave, I get a text from the school inviting me to a craft fair where they're trying to raise money, and now I'm already irritated and want to homeschool.
It's amazing, man. It's just but they think, well, once they've given us permission, so you know, they've taken even the term permission marketing and just bastardized it to a point of saying that's not what I gave you permission for. We need to be having child gloves on. We need to be delicate with that information if it comes to from an ethical marketing side. Just because we've given you that avenue doesn't mean I've given you permission to necessarily send me anything you want in that list. And heaven forbid you ever end up on a mass text list of your teenager's phone number, because it's happened to me 7 times. And man, those kids can text really quickly.
There are a lot of questions that I wish I could ask you on this topic, but I have one final one before we reach the end of this this hangout. There is a fine line between privacy and personalization, and brands need to recognize that line moves a lot because everyone has their creepy line, and it moves from person to person. So my last question, and I want to direct it to Matt first, and then I'll open it up to the rest of the panel. But as customers, do we have the right to own and control all of our data? Or is there a reasonable line between what should be available to a marketer as part of a purchase transaction, for example, versus what is gathered without a customer's explicit knowledge or permission?
Well, certainly I think that consumers have the right to know what data has been collected and what data is being used and why it's being used and why it's being collected. You know, and even the current privacy legislation has clauses around you can request what information a business has on you and why they're using it. And then you also have the right to ask them to update it, delete it, change it, modify, those types of things. And I don't know if people use that enough, or people expect, you know, they're not reading the terms of service. There was something I read recently. If you read every terms of service cover to cover for every site that you regularly use, it would take you 3.5 days. So that's significant time to invest in, you know, why is data being collected, how is it being used, and I think part of that has just become people are trying to protect themselves from so much that they make these ginormous privacy policies and ginormous terms of service use, so that consumers sometimes are intimidated by reading it, first off. But second, they're going to agree to do things unknowingly. And, the biggest lie on the internet, I agree. So certainly, I think consumers have the right to know, and they have the right to withdraw consent and withdraw permission for the data you've collected, or even some of the data you've collected. Whether it's with an explicit consent or an implied consent, certainly I think consumers have the right to know, and they have the right to control that. Do I necessarily agree with things like delete yourself from the internet that we've seen recently coming out of the EU? I don't necessarily agree completely with that, but I do think consumers have the right to choose when and where, and address that specifically with each brand or each site that has their information and is choosing to use it.
Well, that's the big part here, though, is that request to withdraw, is that right to say I'm done, and they make it so hard to go through those steps sometimes. That was the big complaint, remember, back last year in the old days with Facebook. How hard was it for you to remove your account, or did it just deactivate it but it was still there? And how do you kind of wipe that slate clean? Like, I don't know if you guys have ever tried to remove a contact on LinkedIn, but I can build a fort out of toothpicks and marshmallows, like 2 stories high, better than I can uncontact somebody on LinkedIn. So if I can't remove other people from my network, me getting out of that network is hard. But that's an old business trick. It's an old business trick to be, to cancel. You have to phone. You have to show up with your birth certificate and your mom to get out of a gym membership. So it's nothing new. And when the currency becomes your data, not your dollar, then we have to make it hard from that side of the thing to remove you, because that is our revenue stream now. Like, I just sitting here, not like I was checking my phone, but I got an email from TripAdvisor, and it says, did you forget something, in the subject line. Literally, when we're sitting here, it just came in, and it said, you researched several places on TripAdvisor recently. Did you end up going? And it shows the 4 places I was just looking at and asking me to review them if I did or did not go. I'm okay with it. I dig TripAdvisor. I've done a bunch of reviews on there. I love the site. I love crowdsourcing type of stuff. But it was unique. They're saying, hey, you looked here, right? So what happened? That's almost over the line for me, but enough for them to, they need reviews. They need all, current reviews and new reviews, so I get it. But there's a line, and I think it's on an onus of us in an ethical marketing way to not make it so impossible for people to say, you know what, I'm good. I want to get off the carousel right now. Because if you don't like how Facebook uses your data, you need to step off that carousel. You do need to remove yourself. So it's up to you to say, look, I don't want it anymore because it's not yours. Okay, it's not your stuff. It's not your content, even though you put it up. If you stay, you got to stay with the party, and we can also debate them changing their terms of service, because that's a huge bone of contention, because I agreed to this, not to what you just put out there. But if I don't want to play that game anymore, I should be able to easily remove myself from the field and not be part of it anymore, too.
Yeah, I think that's spot on, and I think that businesses need to start doing what we all talk about in marketing of what's in it for me, and actually explain, hey, here's why us having this information is going to make it a better experience for you. Here's how we're going to have more relevant offers, or, whatever. Like, let's take, Scott, you go to Vegas a lot, and so you now know, where you want to go, where you don't want to go, and all those kind of things. But it's still, if something was new, you would love if someone was like, hey, you like, A, B, and C, you should check out this new place. Like, you're going to be like, hey, that's helpful. And so if someone was like, hey, here's what's in it for you, you get to know, this, we're going to have better offers for you, those things. I think people would then be less afraid of what are you doing with it and those kind of things. If the companies would just say, this is what we're doing with it. The problem is most of them aren't doing anything with it but selling it to everyone else, and, just kind of gets regurgitated everywhere, rather than doing what we've talked about this whole time of making offers that, are more welcome, more relevant, something where we're going to be like, oh, hey, cool, like, I'm glad, that I now know that. I don't understand, like, you take Amazon, for example. If I buy, Scott's book on marketing, it's going to come up and say, people that bought this also bought, and it's going to, give me choices. Amazon does that. It's one of the reasons Amazon is so successful. We don't mind that, yet we go to any other business, and it's never like that. imagine if I went to Burger King and they said, hey, everybody that got this also gets a milkshake. Well,
Yeah.
then, damn it, I want a milkshake too, right? Like, I don't want to be the guy who didn't get a milkshake. That sounds amazing. Like that, but like no one's doing that. Yeah, we all love Amazon, and because they take the data and then they use it for our benefit. Not saying that they do it all perfect, but just saying like more companies to me kind of need to look at that and say, oh, this is how we could use it, rather than saying, oh, we now know everything about this person. How can I sell that?
Absolutely. So thanks so much for your time. Really appreciate it. One final question for each of you. Where can our viewers connect with you and read up on what you're up to?
I'm unmarketing everything. So Twitter, Facebook, website, book. Unselling will be out October 1st, 2014. So you can see me ranting online anywhere you choose.
So I'm emailkarma.net. That's my my website and my Twitter. Also, I'm emailkarma on Facebook, so you can find me there, or inboxmarketer.com.
I am John Morgan on Twitter and Facebook, and my website is johnmichaelmorgan.com because I'm pretentious.